What's up guys, welcome to another video. It's been highly requested for me to do another build video for the new season. So here it is, the season 14 Lillia build guide. So let's get straight into it. First of all, you're going to want to know what items to build at the beginning of the game, right? So you have the three options for the jungle pet: the green pet, the blue pet, and the red pet. So in my opinion, I think all the pets are fine on Lillia, but in terms of what I would build the red pet most of my games. And then if I'm running overheal and I want to go a little bit tankier, maybe I'll try the green pet. And honestly, the blue pet, I don't like it so much anymore since the movement speed nerfs. But it's still a good pet if you want to have fast tempo. So just pick whatever pet you prefer. I think the red one is the most consistent, but at the end of the day, it should be something that you enjoy and that you feel comfortable with. And then moving on, after your first clear or your first gank, you're going to want to recall, and you want to think about the best items to buy in the early game to give you power spikes and good items to build into when you don't have that much money. So what I would recommend is to try to get a dark seal on one of your first 2 or 3 recalls, and then alongside the dark seal you just fit in the items that build into your first full item, right? So the item components that build into your first full item. One of the most common components is going to be amplifying tome, and another one is the ruby crystal, and those two items build into a lot of Lillia's items. So if you can get a recall where you get either one of those and a dark seal, that's very good. A lot of times what I will do after doing a full clear is I'll get a ruby crystal and a dark seal. But you can also go amplifying tome depending on, if you want to do more damage or not. Before we go into the full item build, let's talk about boots, okay? I know I had very strong opinions about plated steel caps and merc treads being the best last season. This season, they removed a lot of cooldown reduction from mage items. So, I would actually recommend that you build Ionian boots a lot of times. I think that they're very strong. But plated steel caps and merc treads are still very good items when you need the extra armor and the auto attack reduction against a team that has a lot of AD or a lot of auto attackers. I would still build plated steel caps, and against a team that has a lot of CC and a lot of magic damage, I'd still build merc treads. Otherwise, I think I would now start building Ionian boots. Additionally, one of the new core component items of Lillia is going to be the Haunting Guise. They brought back this item for the new season, and its total cost is 1300 gold, and to build it, you need an Amplifying Tome and a Ruby Crystal. It gives you 35 ability power, 200 health, and a new passive called Madness. For each second in combat with enemy champions, deal 2% bonus damage up to a maximum of 6%, which means that after 3 seconds of combat, you deal 6% bonus damage. Now, I would recommend that this be one of the components that you rush while building into Liandry's, which is the first item in the build. I believe that Liandry's should be the first item in the build because it gives you more damage and a nice balance of health than you would be getting from Rylai's or Riftmaker, which would be the other two options I would be considering. Additionally, I think that Jack Show is not going to be a first item anymore because they removed the healing passive and added a stacking passive that is a little bit weaker. So to get it to Liandry's, the item recipe is Haunting Guise and a Blasting Wand, and it gives you 90 ability power, 300 health, which is new, and 2 passives, okay? The first passive is Torment, which dealing damage with abilities causes enemies to burn for 2% maximum health magic damage per second for 3 seconds, which is the old passive. And they also added Suffering. For each second in combat with enemy champions, gain 2% bonus damage up to a max of 6% bonus damage, which is the same as the Haunting Guise passive. Now moving on to an item to go into your second slot is going to be Riftmaker. I believe this item is the best item for this slot because it gives you more health, more damage, and a new Omnivamp passive. So let's just read it. So the total cost is 300 gold, and the item recipe is also Hunting Guise, but this time with a Fiendish Codex. It gives you 80 ability power, 15 ability haste, and 350 health. It also gives you 2 passives. Void Corruption. For each second in combat with enemy champions, deal 2% bonus damage, max 10%. At maximum strength, gain 10% Omnivamp. And it also gives you Void Infusion, which is the same as the old Demonic Embrace passive, which is gain 2% of your bonus health as ability power. So this is a nice second item because you already have the bonus health from Liandry's, and now you have the bonus health from Riftmaker, and you instantly get that boost of ability power. Now, if you're playing a game where you don't really have a front line and you might not need as much damage, you can also consider going Jack Show as your second item. I believe that Jack Show can be a great item as your second item because it gives you a good amount of armor, magic resist, and health, and the passive is quite strong if you are playing that tank playstyle. So the total cost of Jack Show is 3200 gold, which is a little bit more expensive than the other items. And the item recipe is now Chain Vest, Negatron Cloak, and a Ruby Crystal, which is a little bit different than the old one. And it gives you a little bit less health because it's not a mythic item anymore. It gives you 300 health, but it gives you 50 armor and 50 magic resist, which is 20 more than normal, but you lose the ability haste. But now we have a different passive called Voidborn Resilience. For each second in champion combat, gain a stack up to a maximum of 5 stacks. At maximum stacks, become empowered, increasing your bonus resist by 30% until the end of combat, which means that Jack Show, it scales off however many resistances you already have, so as you go further into the game, it'll actually get more valuable based off how much more armor and magic resist you have. The reason that this new passive is a little bit weaker than the old one is because while you're gaining stacks, you don't actually gain anything. You have to wait until you get to 5 stacks before you get any type of bonus. Which is why I think that Jack Show is much weaker than it was. However, I think it has its place in games where you're going to need to tank more. And I think with Lillia, since she's a very melee type champion, she has to kind of get in the face of the enemy. I think that there can still be many games where you want to build tanky to make up for the fact that your team doesn't have a tank. If you are Lillia one trick, then sometimes you'll just have games where your team doesn't pick any tanks and you might have to fill that role. Okay, now for your third item slot, I would actually put Rylai's as one of the best items to build third. Rylai's is not changed much this season. It still does the same thing, it has a slowing passive on your abilities, and it gives you a ton of health, 400 health I believe, and a ton of AP. So Rylai's is always a good item on Lillia because, you know, if you're slowing the enemy and you're going fast, then you're going even faster compared to the enemy. So I always think that Rylai's is a great item, especially if you're playing into a heavy melee team comp. Rylai's does a very good job of slowing them, allowing you to run circles around them and get more damage out. Now, here comes the interesting part. When you get to your third item and your third, fourth, and fifth item, there are more options in terms of like what items you could build, because at that point, you're gonna want to be building based off the individual game rather than just going one cookie cutter build. So I'm gonna show you guys best builds for if you're doing really good, and then all the other options you can think about depending on the game state. So like I said, for your third item, Rylai's is going to be one of your best items if you're ahead, but if you're behind, then you might consider these other items. So let's get into it. The first item I would consider is Force of Nature. Now, when would you buy this item? When the enemy team has a lot of magic damage and you're a little bit when the enemy team has a lot of magic damage. You can build this item when you're ahead or behind. Now, the changes that they made to this item from last season is they reduced the magic resist from 60 to 55, but they changed the passive to this. Passive Absorb. Taking magic damage from enemy champions grants a stack of Steadfast, up to a maximum of 8 for 7 seconds. Enemy immobilizing effects grant an additional 2 stacks. One spell can add a new stack of Steadfast every 1 second. Dissipate. While at 8 stacks of Steadfast, gain 70 magic resist and 10% increased movement speed. Now, both of those stats are going to be very good for you in a game where the enemy team has a lot of magic damage. Because when you add total magic resist, when you're in the fight fully stacked, you get 55 plus 70, which is going to be 125 magic resist, and your movement speed is going to be 5% plus 10% to 15% movement speed. So those stats are both amazing. Now, on the flip side, if you're playing against a team that has a lot of AD damage and they attack really fast, like, you know, you have Yasuo, I don't know, Draven, Zeri, some type of AD carry champions on the enemy team, a Vayne, anything like that, you might consider going Frozen Heart as your tank item because, you know, you're playing Lillia. To do your damage, you have to get in their face, and if you get in their face, the Frozen Heart or a passive actually hits most of the enemy team. And what they did this season is they reduced the cost from 2,700 to 2,300, which means that you might lose a few things, right? The armor goes from 90 to 70, but nothing else actually changes. You still have the old passive, which is the best part about the item, which means that you can just walk into them and slow all their attack speed for 2,300 gold. So I think that Frozen Heart can be a great item in the right situation against an AD team comp. Additionally, there are some games where the enemy team has some AD champions but you're a little bit further ahead You don't want to buy a full tank item. You want to be doing more damage, right? That's when I would recommend going Zhonya's. Because Zhonya's allows a lot more playmaking, so if you're ahead and you have more agency, you can make more plays, but it doesn't reduce attack speed, right? So just think about if the enemy team has a lot of attack speed, think about Frozen Heart. If the enemy team doesn't, but you still want some armor, go Zhonya's. What they changed about Zhonya's is they made it much more expensive. They went from 3,000 gold to 3,250 gold, and they removed Stopwatch as a component and combined it with Seeker's Arm Guard. So now you just have Seeker's Arm Guard, but it also has the one-time Stopwatch passive. And the ability power of Zhonya's went from 80 to 120. The armor went from 45 to 50. But they removed the ability haste. But, you know, it's Zhonya's. It's a classic item. It's really good on Lillia. It combos well with your ult. So, against an armor team comp where you still want to do damage, I would recommend Zhonya's. And just a side note, I would also maybe consider going Jack Show as your third item as well. It's definitely a possibility. Just don't forget that. Now, for your fourth item slot, this is the point in the game where I want to add a little bit more magic damage and maybe some magic penetration. So, the best item, if you're really far ahead, is going to be Shadow Flame. Now, the new Shadow Flame is a little bit different than the old one. This one does not, you know, do more damage based off how much shield they have. It actually has a new passive, which is Cinder Bloom. Magic damage and true damage critically strike enemies below 35% health, dealing 20% increased damage. Increased to 30% for damage over time and pet effects. Your damage over time abilities are going to be doing 30% more damage when the enemy team is below 35% health, which sounds pretty good for Lillia, right? So this is kind of like a new item. It's not anything like the old Shadow Flame. So I'll read off the stats for you guys. It's 3,200 gold. The item recipe is Needlessly Large Rod and a Hextech Alternator, but it gives you 120 ability power and 10 magic penetration. It's a good item against teams that have low magic resist and they're squishy, or if you're just really far ahead. Now, for the alternate items for your fourth slot, first, I would recommend Storm Surge, just because it's a really fun item and it's very snowbally. So I would recommend Storm Surge if you are really far ahead and you want to just one-shot the enemy team if they have a lot of squishy champions, because the passive Storm Surge is really cool. So I'll just read the item for you. So the total cost is 2,900 gold, which is pretty cheap. The item recipe is a Hextech Alternator and an Aether Wisp. It gives you 100 ability power, so a little bit less than Shadow Flame, but it also gives you 10% magic penetration and 5% movement speed, which is, you know, you always like movement speed. Now the passive is Storm Raider. Dealing 35% of a champion's maximum health within 3 seconds applies Storm Surge to them and grants the user 25% movement speed for 2 seconds. The Storm Surge is after 2 seconds, Storm Surge strikes the target with lightning, dealing 120 to 260 based on level, plus 40% AP magic damage to them. If they die to the lightning or before the lightning strikes, it detonates immediately in a large area around them and you gain 30 gold. This item is pretty good at snowballing. It has a little bit of magic penetration, but you have to deal 35% of a champion's maximum health within 3 seconds to apply it, which means that you're going to want to be pretty far ahead and playing against a pretty squishy team comp to make full use of this item. Now, the other two alternate items is going to be Void Staff and Rylai's. We already talked about Rylai's. It hasn't changed since last season, but Void Staff has. Void Staff changed the total cost from 2,800 to 3,000 gold. It's a little bit more expensive, but the item recipe is still the same, and the ability power goes from 65 to 80, and the magic penetration stays the same. So it's the same classic Void Staff, but you know, there are games when an team is stacking magic resist where you're going to want Void Staff, so that's why I put that there. And for your fifth and final slot, you're going to want to put Rabadon's Death Cap in the most optimal place. If you're doing really good, you always want to finish off your build with Rabadons. It just increases your damage by a ton, and it's a solid item. So the total cost is the same as before, but they changed the ability power from 120 to 140 while reducing the increase of your ability power from 40% to 35%. So it's a little bit weaker in terms of scaling, but it's still your classic Rabadons. And then for your alternates to that, I would try Malignance. It's the new item. I haven't tried it too much, but it seems like a fun item. it does a lot of damage with your ult, because you might not think that it activates with your ult, but it actually does activate after you've slept them and then you wake them up. So what is it activating? I'll read that to you right now. The total cost is 2800 gold. It builds from a lost chapter and a fiendish codex. It gives you 80 ability power, 20 ability haste, and 600 mana. It has two passives that are pretty interesting. Scorn, gain 20 ability haste for your ultimate, and Hate Fog. Whenever you damage an enemy champion with your ultimate, burn the ground beneath them for 3 seconds, dealing 60 plus 6 AP magic damage every second and reducing their magic resist by 1 per user level for as long as they are on the burning ground. Do I think this is going to be one of Lillia's best items? Probably not, but I'm curious to see what you guys think about it and if maybe you could fit it somewhere else within the build, because when I read it, it doesn't seem like the best Lillia item, but you know, you never know. As the season progresses, it could be a good item. We'll see. And then finally, Banshees is always just a good item to fit somewhere into your build. They changed it a little bit. It's a little bit more expensive now, but it's the same item. And you can actually build the component which gives you the shield now, the full shield. So Banshees, it costs 3100 gold now, has the same item recipe, gives you 120 AP instead of 80, gives you 50 magic resist, no ability haste, but you get the passive on the component item. So yeah, that's my outline for the new build for Season 14. If you have any recommendations or any item ideas that you might have thought of, feel free to drop them in the comments below. I'm very interested to hear what everyone is cooking up. The build is definitely not set. I haven't fully experimented all the builds, but these items seem to work. But we'll just see what happens as the season progresses. I'm so excited to be doing Lillia content for you guys. I hope you keep supporting the channel, and I hope you subscribe and like the video. Thank you so much.
Forget so much when they awake. A lady never does. So beautiful. Quiet things are strong. That's why I'm whispering. Dreams are funny things. Sometimes they have feathers. Sometimes they're all wobbly. Sometimes they lift me up like a bubble.
Rampage. Your turret has been destroyed. Shut down. Your team has destroyed a turret.
Daydreams, night dreams, morning dreams, dusk dreams. Every human has a little sparkle. Dreams of northern gardens grow.
Killing spree.
Oh, Mr. Roots, you almost tripped me.
Enemy double kill.
When I'm quiet, I hear so many things. Every time I hold my branch, I see the tree.
Double kill. Triple kill.
A curving
Rampage.
quest towards possibilities.
Your team has destroyed a turret.
Whoopsie,
An enemy has been slain. An ally has been slain. An enemy has been slain.
and so then it's done.
Has been slain. Unstoppable. Dominating. Your team has destroyed a turret.
Don't judge a flower by its bud.
An enemy has been slain.
Dreams so the
An
humans
ally has been slain. Your team has destroyed an inhibitor. Your team has destroyed a turret. Your team has destroyed an inhibitor.
The beauty of the world beckons desires to be real. When they say goodnight, do you think they mean it?
Legendary. team has destroyed an inhibitor.
Hold my branch without dreaming.
And it went